Hey, Larkin Rose here, and guess what? It is time for the world to see the Jones Plantation. On August 5th, we will be having an online lunch party, virtually so, but anybody with an internet connection all over the world can sign up. The link will be in the description below for how to be at this Eventbrite event. Now, this isn't just the movie. This is going to be, before the movie, there's a half hour with me and Andrew Treglia, who's the director, and the guy who plays Mr. Jones. There may also be some surprise guests yet to be announced. And then we show the movie for the first time to people all over the world. There's been a couple screenings that you had to be at in person to see it in Phoenix and then New Hampshire. But and then there was a rough cut down at Anarchapulco a while back. But yeah, the whole world is now going to be able to sign in to see this thing. And so we have a half hour beforehand, a sort of virtual meet and greet, and we'll be chatting with people and doing fun stuff. And then we show the whole movie, and then after the movie, we'll be hanging out and taking questions and having discussions about the making of and the intention and what hope people get out of it, and both pro-freedom people and everybody else in the world and all that. So, yeah, if you want to sign up for that, again, that's going to be August 5th. You can already pre-order your tickets now for that special event. And then after that, oh, by the way, if you're not able to actually watch it then, if you sign up and get tickets for the launch party, the virtual launch party, you can watch it later. You can go back in and sign in if you're like busy at the time it's actually going to be showing. So that's a thing you can do. And then the movie on its own is going to be for sale online, and there's going to be other screenings in Dallas and LA, and I'll give you the details of that. But it's about to be able to be viewed by people all over the world if you sign in for this online launch party thing. Yeehaw. But I thought I'd also do a video that kind of relates to that, because as you probably know, if you've heard of the Jones Plantation, it takes place on a chattel slave plantation in the American South back in the days of open slavery. And I thought a very relevant issue to both sides of the analogy, because obviously the point of the movie isn't to say slavery is bad. Like, pretty sure everybody knows that, or everybody thinks they know that. The kind of slavery they're not used to, they can all point at and go, that's horrible and dreadful and evil, and which it totally was. It's about as evil as humanity can get, is pretending to own another human being and treating them like property. But both sides of the analogy, whether you're talking about actual chattel slavery or the version we have now where you have a parasitical ruling class that robs and exploits people, both of them continued because a lot of people just viewed the institutions as, well, that's just how things are. And with the implication being, and that's how things are going to be because that's just how things are. And I've talked before about how bad people are at being objective about how things should be based on how they are. They think that, well, everybody does this, and this is what I grew up seeing everywhere. This is what I grew up surrounded by. This is what everybody I know does. And there's a whole lot of examples of that. And for every example I mention, people can get offended. Like the entire concept of schooling, if we're all gonna take our kids and stick them in an institution, like that's just an assumption now that everybody goes, well, of course you do that, because they can't imagine a world in which you didn't. Things like male circumcision in the U.S. Well, you just do that. It's like, why? Isn't it sort of dreadful? Well, we're not going to think about it. We're just going to say, well, this is what you do. This is what everybody does. And I could run down the list and offend more people. But you get the point. And even if you have disagreements and say, well, no, I think this is a good idea for such and such a reason, almost nobody is having a rational discussion about a whole lot of aspects of their life. They just see, well, that's how it is, so I guess that's how it must be. And for us today, trying to imagine that being the mindset of a slave is really difficult. Like, it's easy for us to assume that, well, of course all the slaves had to know it was wrong and evil and insane and had to be like eager to overthrow the master or run away. They didn't. The victims of that even thought, a lot of them thought, well, this is just how things are, and this is legitimate, and I'm the rightful property of that guy. And if you don't believe me, you can read the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, who was a slave. And he wrote about his experiences being a slave and his own mental evolution of figuring out, this isn't okay. Now, for us, in the here and now, we have the luxury of looking back, and everyone around us recognizes, yeah, that was horrible and evil and insane and, despicable, heinous, and every other negative adjective you can think of. But back then, it took a long process for someone like Frederick Douglass to realize, this really isn't okay. This is not just. That guy doesn't rightfully own me. I'm not his property. I'm not obligated to work for him. And to see somebody write the experience of their own mental process going through that, it's really damn hard to relate to it now for us who've never been in that situation. But if you grew up and everyone around you told you you were the property of the plantation owner or a feudal lord or a king or whatever, you would probably believe it. And only the rare person would be able to back up and objectively go, something's horribly wrong about this. I know we're all doing this. I know this is how it's done. This is the way things are, yada, yada, yada. And I think there's something horribly wrong about it anyway. Most people aren't capable of that. And what I really hope the Jones Plantation helps a lot of people do, like today, it's not a challenge to make people go, yeah, I think slavery was wrong. Like, okay, duh, almost the whole world has figured that out. Although there is still slavery going on, but at least most of the Western world understands that that's horribly evil and nasty. And the people who still do that trading have to do it quietly because most of the world recognizes that's evil. They didn't used to have to do it quietly because most of the world was like, well, that's how it is. And it wasn't even a racial thing, and it wasn't it was everywhere. It was most of the planet, people were owning other people in like all directions, nationalities and races and religions, and like it didn't matter. It was going in all directions all over the place. That was the norm. That was the way things were. And it took a long time before some weirdo freak fringe human being said, yeah, I know that's the way things are, but I'm pretty sure it's not the way things should be. And at the time, that was radical and weird and outside of the box and fringe for anybody to say, maybe people shouldn't own other people. And now we can say, that's so self-evident and obvious. Why was that a debate before? Well, what I hope the Jones Plantation is going to do is help people start that first step on the journey where they look back on what we have now and they think the same thing. They think, how did anybody ever think this was okay and legitimate? You have a bunch of political parasites and they rob us and boss us around and tell us that we're bad people if we disobey, regardless of what their commands are. If we don't pay enough tribute to them and we don't obey every stupid, random, arbitrary whim of the political parasites, most people are just, well, that's how it is. That's law and order. That's our system. That's democracy or republic or whatever. That's what we learned in civics class. That's how it works. And the ability of normal people to say, okay, if that's how it works because there's a reason and there's like a rational basis, then it's okay to back up and examine it and question it, because if there's actually a rational reason for it, and if it's legitimate and moral and all that, you can explain why, and you can test it and study it and go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We should be doing that. But if you back up and say, well, let's dare to question this and see if it actually makes sense. A lot of people, including myself and, tens of thousands of people I know who are now voluntarists, backed up and said, yeah, I know this is how things are, but is it how things should be? And then going through a pretty dang simple logical process with the most basic moral and philosophical concepts and principles, and realizing that's not at all okay. That's not how things should be. It's not legitimate. It's not moral. And the thing is, the fact that today the slavery isn't like you're chained to a tree or you're like forced to go pick cotton and then whipped if you don't hand over enough to the master. Like, okay, we're not brainwashed in that particular way to think we're obligated to put up with that crap. People were in the past, and they were trained to think that that is legitimate and just, and they're obligated to go along with that. But there's a different kind of slavery that's actually way more productive for the beneficiaries of the robbery. It also happens to be a lot more physically comfortable. Like, you pick the average taxpayer. If they had to choose between picking cotton in the field for 12 hours in the blazing sun and then occasionally getting whipped and just barely getting enough to stay alive, between that and what they have now, most people say, yes, this is lots better. It is a whole lot less overtly evil and horrendous suffering than that. Yeah, that's true. And nobody's saying that they equate in degree of nastiness. But what I hope the Jones Plantation is going to do, and what I hope like almost everything I work on is going to do, is make people say, yeah, but what about the underlying principle? Like, for example, if back in slave days they said, okay, 6 out of the 7 days, you own yourself and you can do what you want, but on Monday, you have to come in and work for the master and do whatever he says, and you don't get paid and you get whipped if you don't do it. But the other 6 days is fine. Like, in principle, is that any better? Like, well, it's better in the other 6 days they're not getting abused, but you're still getting abused once a week. That's still not okay for the exact same reason, because in principle, it would still be slavery. The fact that it's 1/7 of the time instead of all the time, that doesn't make the principle go away. In fact, even if you said, oh, I'll only enslave you for like an hour every Monday, like, yeah, that's still totally evil and wrong and immoral, even though on a practical sense, that would be a lot less horrible than, 12 hours a day every day. Oh, you're only enslaving me that much? Guess what? In principle, that's still just as wrong and just as immoral and just as illegitimate, even if the person you're doing to suffers a whole lot less than the one who may be enslaved 24 hours a day. But to see those principles and say, this much slavery is bad and this much slavery is bad for the same reason, that requires being able to ponder actual philosophical concepts and actually question things. And that's the focus of pretty much everything I do, including the Jones Plantation. And now it's out, and I want lots and lots of people, normal people, who watch it. I've mentioned before, I think this is going to happen in 2 waves. First of all, lots of pro-freedom people are going to watch it and go, oh, that was awesome, it was so cool to see that, and rah, 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 and yay. And then the second phase is to have all those people go, now we need the rest of the world to see this and see what they think about it. And then I want to see the rest of the world see it, or as many people as possible, obviously, and have them go, yeah, is it really okay what's going on? Fundamentally, the underlying principles, not, well, should we have a slightly nicer master? Because the movie points out why that isn't really the question that matters. And to get people to actually look at the underlying assumptions that they've never questioned, and the premise and the way things are, and to actually look at the foundation of the way things are when it comes to government and law and taxation and politicians and bossing people around and robbing everybody, to have people even begin to glance at that and go, is that really okay? Is this really legitimate? Is this how humanity should be organized and arranged? And I think this movie is going to kick a bunch of people in the pants and make them take that first step in questioning things. And I've talked before about how that first step is the most important step. Was for a hell of a lot of people I know, and you can probably say the same if you're a voluntarist, about the other voluntarists you know, as soon as somebody starts to question things, and most of us have, remember that. It's like when we caught, wait a minute, is this okay at all? And then once they start down the proverbial rabbit hole, they take themselves the rest of the way. Then they're curious and they read stuff and they watch stuff and they think about stuff. But that first step, and again, I'm not comparing the degree of nastiness, but in principle, to compare it to a slave, the first day he goes, why am I obligated to work for that guy? I mean, I know they say he owns me, but I'm a person, right? And he's a person. how does he own me? Why don't I own him? Or why don't I own me and he owns him? Like, the moment somebody's brain starts to look underneath the way things are and the system as we have it and, you know, all that just meaningless drivel, and says, is this right? That is the first step to that person becoming free. And to read, I highly recommend the autobiography. It's actually sort of a collection of the works of Frederick Douglass. To watch somebody's journey through that process, it's amazing. And it's hard to relate to now because we think, well, wasn't this obvious to all of them? No, it wasn't. Just like today, there's a bunch of horrible things going on, and it's not obvious to the people going along with it that it is foundationally illegitimate. They just think, well, we don't have the best master, and he isn't always all that nice to us, but if we just had the right one and he worked us only at certain hours out in the cotton fields, but to be able to question the underlying principle, that is the thing that matters. And I think this movie, The Jones Plantation, is going to nudge a hell of a lot of people who watch it. Normal people who've never even thought about this stuff, going to nudge them into thinking, wow, is our whole system actually based on some bogus assumptions and premises? Not just the details on the surface, but looking underneath, is this really okay? Is this legitimate? And once they start that journey, for the vast majority of them, there's no turning back. So anyway, I'm really dang proud of how the movie turned out. The vast majority of that wasn't my doing. I wrote the script, which I'm pretty dang proud of, and then the script changed a million times, and I wasn't even the only one who wrote the script. Guy who played Jones Plantation helped out with parts of it, and director Andrew Treglia did a bunch of parts of it, so that wasn't even entirely mine, and I wasn't the one who made it into a movie, but I'm really dang proud of how it's turned out, and I'm dying to see the effect it has on the rest of the world. First, I want to see the pro-freedom people go, whoa, this is awesome, which a bunch of people who were at the first two screenings said. But then I want to see how it hits the rest of the world and helps the rest of the world to start to question the way things are and say, maybe the way things are is fundamentally not the way things should be. And I mean, it's easy to say, but obviously that would be a momentous occurrence for humanity as a whole to actually back up and look at the underlying assumption of the way society is structured with authoritarian hierarchies and ruling classes and governments and say, is that legitimate? So anyway, if you want to be among the first to see this thing, online on August 5th, we are going to release it to the planet. And below is the link to sign up and do that thing, which will include our before and after virtual parties with me and the director and some other people, and having a fun little chat and answering questions and all that. And then after that, it'll be available to purchase online, the movie just by itself, and we'll have other screenings, and I'll tell you about all the other details of everything else. Like, we're unleashing this thing as fast as we possibly can in as many ways as we possibly can, but our budget is like almost nothing, so it's been a challenge, and there have been delays and stuff. But August 5th, that is now written in stone, it will be released to the world. And if you want to be among the first to see it, then check out the link below. Yee-haw. And by all means, invite other people over to watch it. And whether they're people already on the same page, people who don't know anything about it, arch enemies, friends, I don't care. I want everybody to see this. So join our giant virtual launch party, which is not just limited to the US. Wherever you are, sign up and be a part of the release of The Jones Plantation. At long last. Yee-freaking-haw.